Hi, welcome to your first advanced painting tutorial. We're going to paint a landscape in watercolour, and please feel free to ask questions, leave feedback, and if you've got any ideas for the future tutorial wise, then let me know in the message box, or you can email me. You can also email me your finished pictures, experiments, and ask for feedback, so don't be scared to do that. Okay, so let's start. Now, if you've watched the beginners tutorial already, because you received the beginners tutorials as well as the advanced tutorials, then you might have seen me paint this landscape already. Okay, and this is the paper that we used, and it's in block form, and because you're advanced you should know a little bit about paper, but if you're not and you still want to watch the beginner's tutorial and you haven't done already, then have a look at it because it explains about paper and setup. So I've got my block here, it's gummed along the side so that it won't cockle or warp, and then once it's finished you peel back the paper and flip it over like I've done with that one. I've got the tape that I used earlier on in that tutorial and it's still usable again. I like to make sure that we don't waste materials, so I'm reusing my masking tape. This is skinny masking tape, not like the normal stuff that you get in the DIY shops. I get it online. It's not dear and it's worth it, especially if you want to put a lovely border around your artworks. You might not like doing that and you can work up to the edge, but that's why I do it. And we're going to do a landscape again, not as basic as the beginner's one, but will have more detail, but follows the same principles. So we're going to start by doing a wet in wet sky, and we're going to lift out a moon or a sun using a bit of tissue paper. And normally I would use a coin or something like that to make a circle, so I'll show you what else you can use instead. So just to start off, we can begin by using the wet in wet technique, and that's just using clean water. I've got two pots here, one for cleaning my brushes and the other for mixing colours. And then I've got my palette, which I explained in the beginner's tutorial is dirty because I tend to use all these colours around the outsides, so rather than wash them off I leave them where they are, and then if I need to mix new colours I use a clean plate or another palette. Okay, so mop brush or Chinese brush like I've got here, and you're just going to go down to about halfway with your water. So wet in wet technique. Choose a blue, any blue you want. Wet it down a little bit. I'm using cerulean blue here, and I'm just going to pop in a little bit of colour. I'm also going to use a little bit of ultramarine. Again, it's up to you what colours you use. You could make a red sky if you wanted to do like a sunset or something like that. Then you could make a red sky, or bits of yellow, or use raw sienna. You can also tilt the paper so that the paint drags a little bit, but I quite like the looseness of that. I'm just going to pop in a little bit more of the cerulean blue just up the top, and again just tilt the paper so it softens. Okay, if you've got pooling, this is called pooling on the edge, then you can just take the edge of a piece of tissue and just lightly touch it, and it will just lift off that pooling colour. Now, I don't have a coin, so I'm just going to make a circular form with my finger. I'm going to put my finger in there I'm just going to make a circular form with the tissue paper. Actually, I will take a pencil with an end on it like that. I'm just going to do a small sort of moon or sun shape. Put the paper over the end. You need to do this while it's wet. So you can use any circular object, and I'm just going to lift out a little moon or sun just about there. Don't move your tissue, just dab once. You'll see a slight impression there. Now, because my sky is quite light, you probably won't see this until it's completely dry. I'm just going to repeat it with a clean piece. So it's going to be a very light mark. I don't know whether you can see that. Let's see. Can you see? Okay. So we've just got a moon shape. Now, if you want it to be bigger, use a bigger coin, or the other option is to lift it off with a brush. So you clean your brush and then just go in and lift a shape off. Now, each time you press on the paper with the brush, you must wipe it because it will be picking up pigment. Okay. So there we go. It's lifting slowly. It's a very soft shape because of the paleness of the colour. So I can see it, but I'm not sure whether you'll be able to pick it up on your screen. Hopefully you can. Okay, so the next thing to do is to put a distant hill. So I'm going to pick up some green. I'm using my mop brush just to pick up some green colour from my palette. Now, this green colour has been created by using lemon yellow and a little bit of ultramarine or cerulean blue, like this. The lemon yellow gives it a sort of acidic colour, which stands out really nice. Now, this sky needs to be completely dry here before you put this on. Unfortunately, I've been talking for a while and it's dried off in the process. So I'm just going to take this brush and I'm going to put a curve into the hill by just using my brush marks in a curved direction like this. Keep adding more paint like so. And it's funny how much, even with the same colour, how much that mark making will give you a curve on that hill. And you want to draw it down to about here. So keep adding, and hopefully you've mixed enough colour to do that with. I mean, it really doesn't matter if the colour varies. Nice sweeping marks. Pick up the colour from the edge or off the masking tape. And you can also enhance that mark making by taking a bit more blue, adding it into the green, and just adding some streaks like this. Pick up some more pigment, and you might even have the odd shadow or something like that, but use that curve mark making. Okay, right, now down the foreground, and hopefully by the time I've finished mixing this section will have dried. We're going to put a little bit of yellow ochre, which is this colour, because you might be advanced, but maybe you've only done a few classes. You might not know all your colours yet. So this is a yellow ochre here. You can use that, or a raw sienna even. Raw sienna is very nice as well. So I'm going to use the same brush, and I'm going to take that pigment. I've wet it down quite a lot, and I'm going to take that pigment, I'm going to put it down here. Now you might find if it moves into that surface there. Now this surface, we want to make it sort of almost like stippled, because it's a field of probably wheat or corn, but it's right at the end of the season and it's very dry. So if we just put like stabbing marks like this down here, then we'll get a different texture to what we created on this layer here. Okay, so again, take up something darker. So add a brown, maybe a burnt umber, into a bit. Now I've got a little bit of leftover brown here, so I'm just going to put the brown there, and I'm going to add some of that yellow ochre into it. I don't want it to be too dark. And while it's still wet, if you just, again, just dab like that into that colour, and you can create some texture in that colour. I'm going to get a fan brush. Yeah, you may have used a fan brush, you may not have used a fan brush, but fan brush is really good for creating marks that go over layers. So if you pick this up while it's still wet and just lift the paint up into, we don't want to go too far because we're not that far away. Okay, just creating a little feathered edge along there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet down a little bit of cadmium yellow, which is this one. And again, it's a little bit dirty, but I don't mind for this. If I was painting canary or something like that, I'd want the yellow to be really clean. But for this purpose, I'm just dipping in my fan brush, and I'm just picking it up on the tips, and I'm just going to put in some flick marks again. And you know, you won't see the strength of colour with your eye necessarily through the camera, but when you put this mark down on your work, you will see it. Now, what do you do if you haven't got a fan brush? So take a detail brush, something like, what have I done with mine? It's here somewhere. No, it's gone missing. Oh no, hang on, I'll show you one in a minute. I'll just finish this job. You need to sort of do this while it's sort of semi-dry, and you can probably see these marks, they're slowly appearing because of the fact that the surface is drying off. So I'm just putting them down in the foreground area. Here's my detail brush, it's hiding under my paper towel. So I've got a detail brush here, and this is a 00 tiny detailer, and you can just use that to put large marks in. But if you haven't got a fan brush, then this is a way of putting your detail marks in. Okay, so leave it like that. Now, if you want to create some shadows or some marks between the layers, maybe you can pick up a little bit of dark brown, burnt umber again with that yellow ochre, and you can put some marks in just to create some sort of shadow. I'm just tapping the surface here, and even though they're very pale, it is surprising what that will do to your picture. Now, these are quite blurry in places, and that's because the surface underneath is still wet. If you want them to be more defined, then wait for the surface to dry before you do this bit. You can always pick up some absolute burnt umber, and you can see the difference in that, just to put in some layers of texture. I'm just going to pick up my fan brush, and it'll be soaking wet, and this is what happens to it when it's soaking wet. It starts to sort of group all the hairs together like this, and what you need to do is dry it off and then separate it so it's back to normal, almost anyway. And then you can use that again just to soften those marks in. You can even pick up a bit more, put it in. This is the way of sort of getting the marks. There's a hair there, but I'm not going to touch it because I want to make sure that it doesn't leave a mark when I lift it off. So again, just in with the darker pigment, put some lines in here and there. Okay, so it's up to you how much detail you go into with regard to texture in that foreground area. Now, to finish the image, we are just going to put in a tree. Now, if you want to practice drawing your trees, you can. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. So if you feel the need, dry this off first, and then you can draw your tree in wherever you want to draw it. It doesn't have to be in the foreground, it can be on the side, as long as it's not in the middle, because you don't want that from a compositional point of view. You want the tree to be either on the left, on the right, or in the distance, or you can draw it halfway down, or wherever you want to put it. You can even put it in the foreground. But I'm going to put mine about here, and I'm just going to lightly draw a line in so that I don't overdo it, mainly. Okay, like this. So I've just got a guide. I don't want to go any higher than that, and I don't want to go any lower than that. It stops you from overdoing it. And I'm just going to take up some of this burnt umber colour, and I'm just going to I'm going to work up here because I know that this area is still wet. However, if it's still wet, it might be nice to have, actually it's not that wet, a slightly blended area at the bottom. So don't draw your trees with a flat line at the bottom here. Always have a broken line like that. Okay. Again, if you need to practice, you can draw and paint trees on a separate sheet, and then you can come back and do your finished one on here. Okay, there are lots and lots of exercises. In fact, there's some on my YouTube channel if you want to practice how to draw trees and paint them. So again, it's up to you what sort of tree you have, whether it's a tree in winter or a summer tree. I mean, the cornfield I said was like coming towards the end, so it's like September. So, or going into autumn, you would have trees that will have lost their leaves already. So you can leave this tree bare, but you'll have some trees that haven't. So if you wanted to make this a late autumn scene, then you could leave them bare, or you can add some leaves. But for me, I'm going to leave it bare. So now I'm going to take a rigger brush. And I've got a rigger brush here. This is the long rigger brush. It's a size 2. Now the reason I'm doing that is because I want to be able to have very thin branches on the end. And if I don't use a rigger brush, it will get far too thick and cumbersome. So just be aware of that. So the good thing about this brush is that you can just flick like that. So you get more natural edges on your branch ends. And the other tip is to turn your work and do branches from all different angles like this. Again, make sure your work is dry before you put your hand on it, and that will just change the dynamic of the marks that you're making and make them look more natural. Keep wetting your brush, not too much water though. You don't want it to be too runny and get out of control. And you want some branches to be, especially down the bottom, a little bit thicker than others. Vary the shape. Remember to turn the paper every now and again, just so you get these delicate changes in line. Overlay the branches. Think about what you're doing. Breathe while you're painting. Loads of people stop breathing when they're painting. And, you know, in order to be relaxed and to make lovely marks, you need to breathe regularly. Okay. Oops. Make sure you fill your tree out. Have some bits coming down and out at funny angles, because the tree is not just a sort of pom-pom shape. Okay. So there we go. Now, we need to make the base of the tree a bit more natural. So I'm going to take some more of that yellow ochre. I'm going to use my rigger brush and I'm going to flick some marks up over the base of the tree like that. Just because the density of the foliage around that tree would be different to the rest of the field. So, and again, you can put more marks everywhere else if you feel like you need to. Put some darker marks, maybe a bit of the suggestion of a bit of shadow, that sort of thing. Okay. The other thing I'd like to do is to put a slight suggestion of some hedging up the back. So again, I'm just going to mix a bit of brown into the hedging, into a green, so that we get a green-brown, a sort of darker colour, because it's in the distance. We're just going to put a little bit of something up there. Maybe a bit thicker. The other thing you can do with things in the distance is just to add a little bit of blue in, and that will send that thing, whatever it is, backwards and into the distance. Okay, there we go. Right, I think the only thing I will do is just put a few more longer marks down the front here. Now you might want to add some late autumnal sort of flowers or seed heads or something into the foreground, but obviously don't go too far into the distance, because you know, as you look further, marks should become smaller. Okay, so I would probably just leave that as it is for now. This is our first session together. Just want you to get to know the painting techniques again. Just have a relaxing time for the first session, and we will get more and more complex as time goes on. If you want to add more things to this picture, you could put some birds in the sky. You could add some, like I said, some seed heads down the foreground. You could even take a scrap bit of tissue, pick up some green, maybe some yellow, and I'll just do it over here. All you do is you just tap your paper. Oops, I need a bit more. I might need a bit more than that. Let's take a bit of green. There we go. Now, so you just sort of tap the paper like this, and you can add your foliage with that just by tapping, scrunching up a bit of, you can use a piece of sponge or just a bit of tissue like I've done here. I might put a bit of that on actually. I'm going to use the bit of yellow ochre though, just because I don't want it to be too green because it's late September and we might just want a little suggestion of the odd leaf that's been left behind on the tree. So just tap very gently, using, again, you know, if you want to experiment on a different piece of paper, don't go mad. We don't want too much on there. Just make sure you can still see through to the distance. There, I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to overdo it. If you feel like you need to practice that technique, practice on a different piece of paper, on the back of something like I just did there, and then you can go on your main picture. Okay, so I'm just going to remove the tape. If you didn't see this in the earlier tutorial, then this is how you do it. This is the safest way to do it, and it's with a hairdryer, and you just literally put it on low and below the masking tape as it comes off. The reason why we do this is so that it doesn't tear the paper. There we have it. Okay, so there we have a slightly more developed landscape than the one in the beginners class. Like I said, use the back of paper to experiment on. Add some extra bits in there. If you want to put a little house in, a few birds, more trees, you could put a fence in, you could put a path in. Have fun. Enjoy your painting. I don't really want to be the one to sort of tell you what to do all the time. I want you to develop your pictures in the way that you want to develop them. You know, you might want to use different colours, you might want to use different types of fields, you might want to use flat surfaces, you know what I mean? So make it your own if you want to. Send me some pictures of your finished work and I'll leave some comments if you want them. But hopefully you'll enjoy this first session. So I will see you next month. There will be little snippets of things coming in over the month, but the main tutorials will be released on the 1st and 2nd of each month. Thanks for joining us again and for your continued support. I do appreciate it. Bye for now.